Good afternoon. Today is the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. It is devoted to the issue of migration and transborder movements to highlight the situation of indigenous communities that live outside of their traditional territories in urban areas or across international borders. At 3 p.m. there will be a special event in the ECOSOC chamber with some high-level remarks as well as a panel of experts from around the world. So I encourage you to cover that as well. We have 3 indigenous experts with us here today to give us their insights on the issues of migration and movement of indigenous peoples. First, Mariam Wallet Aboubakrine. She's the chairperson of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and a medical doctor from Mali. She is a member of Tin Hinan, a women's association focused on indigenous peoples in Africa, in particular the Tuareg. The second speaker will be Mr. Prasert Trakansuphakon from the Karen people of Thailand. He served as director of the Regional Indigenous Knowledge and Peoples Network in Southeast Asia for many years, and he's currently the chairperson of the Pakanya Association for Sustainable Development, as well as of the Intermountain Peoples Education and Culture in Thailand Association. He also serves on the advisory board of the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. And our third speaker is Amy Juan from the Tohono O'odham Nation of Southwest Arizona in the United States, the desert people. She is a founding member of the Tohono O'odham Hemajkam Rights Network, a grassroots collective advocating for indigenous rights and freedom of movement across borders. She's also a member of the Indigenous Food Knowledge Network Steering Committee and an advisor for the Hemajkam Youth Alliance, as well as the CEO of Sovereign Remedies. And she currently works for the International Indian Treaty Council. So they will each give brief remarks and then take your questions. And we'll start with Mariam.
Happy International Day of Indigenous Peoples. I would like to thank the Secretariat of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples under the branch of Development and the Department of Public Information for having this press conference on occasion of the International Day of Indigenous Peoples. I would like also to welcome my co-panelists, my brother and sister from other indigenous communities. This year theme on migration and indigenous peoples movement is relevant, very relevant for many reasons. I have personal reasons that really show me the importance of that theme as from a nomadic people, the Tuareg people, who used to move from not from, but within a very large and wide territory, which is today limited and is the Sahel and Sahara region. I also have been refugee myself and currently immigrant from Mali to Canada. It's also relevant as regarding my position as the chair of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and as indigenous people's human rights defenders. We know that indigenous peoples are also concerned about the issue of migration and movement, and that our body, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples, is mandated to advise UN agencies and the member states as well as other actors on all issues affecting indigenous peoples like movement and migration. Regarding the situation of displaced indigenous people. There are several situations. We can have the traditional displacement, like the one that I introduced from my community, people moving from a part to another in the same country, like in the nomadism, or crossing the new borders developed, like, or drawn after the colonization. We have also the displacement from rural to urban area. In French, the right word is exode rural, but I don't know the word in English, where people look for better opportunities like study or jobs, and it's more youth who do that and men than others. We have also the migration from a country to another, and in the context of natural disasters or conflict, we can have the internal displaced peoples who move from a region in a same country to another, and finally the refugees who cross borders, also for reasons of natural disaster, or for more likely for reason of conflict. Now, if we go to causes or the root of these displacement or migration among indigenous peoples, it's not different from other general displacement or migration. We have conflict. For example, now a very large population from my community is displaced in Mauritania or from Libya to other countries due to the conflict ongoing in Mali and in Libya. We have also the natural disasters, which are more likely related to climate change. We have the lack of basic services like education, health, and over infrastructure, poverty, persecution, and epidemia. The challenges that indigenous people may face or migrant during their journey of displacement or migration are various. Like for the displacement, there are today a new borders that are created by colonizers, and that forbid people to move in the traditional way, and it reduced their space of moving. We have, for those who migrate for other areas, the difficulty of insertion in new community due to lack of capacity, lack of education, acknowledgement of languages, of dominant languages. Indigenous peoples in this situation find themselves in township in the areas where they migrate. For example, the Tuareg from Niger, when they go to the big cities in West Africa, they find themselves as beggars, mandia. Yeah, as beggars. And if we see in other areas, like in North America or Latin America, the youth are more exposed to drug using or sexual abuse or being prostitute for indigenous women. The third one, the third challenge is also the cutting or the disruption of any contact with culture, tradition, and traditional way of life that bring to loss of identity and other consequences like mental health issues. But we can't see just this phase of migration. Migration has also opportunities for indigenous peoples, transit community, as well as the welcoming or the countries where they hosting countries. For example, for the displaced one, for the displacement within an area to another, that's determinant for the economic of these peoples. In the case of Tuareg peoples, it allows them to better manage the natural resources and to access to market with and to exchange their product with neighboring peoples. For migrations, there are a lot of opportunities, for example, economic opportunities, and for displaced and in the like international internal displacement or refugees in the catastrophe naturelle, in the natural disasters, they have the opportunity to save their life at first, even if they can't. They can see if any future, they at least can save their life within the refugees camp. So in conclusion, I think that this International Day consecrated to migration and displacement will be a very welcome, as we may know that United Nations just or the international community just adopted the Global Compact on migration. They adopted 2 years ago the New York Declaration on Migration and Refugees, and the next in that context, in December, the head of states will meet in Morocco, debating on migrations, and the next year, 2019, high-level political forum will review the SDG 10, empowering people and ensuring inclusiveness and equality, where the migration is will be tackled under the goal 10.7. So it's a momentum for us to recall the international community to take in consideration the right of indigenous peoples in all the policy that they will make, and collaborate, partner with us for a better inclusion and a better fulfillment of the right of indigenous peoples enshrined by the United Nations Declaration on the Right of Indigenous Peoples. And just before finishing, I would like to present you this textile to remember the indigenous women and to make them visible, because this year we launched a campaign with FAO and Notimia to make more visible the contribution to indigenous women to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prasert?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the Secretariat of Permanent Forum of Indigenous People to invite me to attend this important event. I would like to give a little bit background of the indigenous people in Thailand that recognized as Chao Khao, or tribal people, not indigenous people. Around in 1959, first time we heard the word Chao Khao, or tribal people. that we never had before. It is the construction of the government. And linked to the word chow cow is explained as the cause of the problematic. One, the cause of deforestation. Second, opium production. And otherwise, it's a danger to the national security because we are non-Thai speaking groups, or we become the others. This is something that this image still continue until now. When they have a flooding, the people just say that, that because the tribal people do the deforestation, they become. A few days ago, before I come here, they have several dams in Thailand start full with called big rain for a few months. So some people bring out the issues, especially in National Park of Kangaja, they have a dam. They said that, current people do the deforestation because they do the shifting cultivation. So that some communities still create, and we are a little bit probably on the image. This is one of the main problems we are facing. The second one, the Thai state claimed that tribal people who have been immigrants and most are original from other countries like China or Burma or something. This is the Thai government declines the existence of indigenous people in Thailand, denies their right to land, territory, and resources. However, the research on the archaeological artifacts and the evidence have reiterated the fact that these indigenous people have lived in this region for hundreds of years, and some of them might have lived before the arrival of the Thai or the Thai people, before building of the nation state, before the state classify laws, in the forest area. They're already there. This area, their land, territory, and resources. But the state assumed that all the forest land belong to the state, even though the people have traditional make use of land before enactment of land and forest law. This one of our problems. We are certain that we are not legal by law. We always, as a compromise to settle, even we stay there for hundreds of years. Another main routes of internal migration in Thailand for the past around 1990, the president stemmed from the state policy remove people for protected area, reserve forest area, where most of them have been superimposed onto the traditional farmland of indigenous people. In many cases, indigenous were relocated involuntarily to uncultivated land without a available support plan. This had driven indigenous people and poor people to urban areas in the hope of the finding of wage labor. We have some example for the Kangaja National Park. The authority relocated Karen people from their traditional homeland without their consent in June 2011. And this case, the people fight in the court, and the Supreme Court decided that the Karen people have resided in the area long before announcement of national park. However, the plaintiffs and their family were not allowed to return to their homeland because it was located in the heart of national park. This judgment just in the 12th of June 2018. This another case. Even we proved that we have stayed there before, but it's very difficult to come back to our homeland after the relocation policy. It is a matter of great concern that at present extractive industry, agriculture, and state conservation policy are pushing indigenous people away from the land. Like many indigenous groups around the world, the current people in Thailand also face tenure insecurity and migration has now also started to severely affect them. Their claim to ancestral land is not recognized, as well as in many countries, despite the existence of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. Another cause of youth migration of indigenous people, it came through education system, because we are focused to have the same curricula all over the country. It's not fixed or appropriate to indigenous children. Even the situation or the context or the knowledge. Education become one main instrument to prepare indigenous youth for migrate to the city. The important reason is that students move to town to pursue their higher education. Unfortunately, in urban centers, a number of young indigenous girls end up in sex business. An increasing number of indigenous people, families are moving to urban areas for various reasons. One of the main reasons is the scarcity of cultivated land due to expanded protected areas and commercial monoculture agriculture throughout the country. Indigenous people, both male and female, come to the city to serve non-agricultural occupation, such as in gas station, construction site, as street vendors. According to trans-border movement and displacement, indigenous people belong to the different indigenous groups had to flee from war zone to neighbor country to settle down in the confinement of refugee camp with substandard livelihoods. These are like the Karen and many groups from Burma side. They come and they put in the refugee camp. They have a very limited and very control that area. And increasing number of indigenous people also come to Thailand with the influx of migrant laborers for neighbor countries, namely Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. There have been reports about violence or labor rights in the different places. Some recommendation: indigenous people should be able to organize their own education system with indigenous integration of indigenous scientific knowledge. The second, indigenous traditional land use system, a right to land and ancestral domain, must be organized officially. Third, state must be made to realize that the state of indigenous people is one of self-identification, not a matter of state decision. Last but not least, in Asia, as there is increasing evidence that the rotating farming or shifting cultivation as the customers' more sustainable use practice contribute to biodiversity, food security, sustainable livelihood and development, climate mitigation, adaptation, and socio-ecological resilience. Full recognition and support should be given to the rotating farming and other customary sustainable practice by government and other relevant sectors through policy and legal reform. By short summary, we believe that ensuring the security of land rights of all people, especially indigenous community, with a focus in revitalize local food system, local livelihood innovation, are the best way to overcome the current problem of migration. Such actions will also reduce violent conflict that also very badly affect. We also reduce violent conflict that also very badly affect our community. Ultimately, it is food and sustainable food system that will ensure the peace, harmony, and well-being of our indigenous community and everyone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Amy, your turn.
Everyone, good day. Thank you for being here and thank you for the invitation. My name is Amy Juan. I come from the Tohono Nation, which is located in southwest Arizona. The traditional homelands of the Tohono span north to the city of Phoenix, south to Hermosillo, Mexico, west to the Sea of Cortez, and east to the San Pedro River. Right now, the established reservation of the Thanatim Nation consists of 2.5 million acres. It's about the size of Connecticut, and we share 75 miles of international border with Mexico. I am 32 years old, and I basically grew up watching my community be militarized and occupied. I'm basically a part of the last generation of my people to know what it's like to move freely. If you are to go down to the Thanatim Nation today, you would see that there's checkpoints to every entrance and exit to the Thanatim Nation. You'll see more Border Patrol agents than you do our own police. You'll see surveillance cameras on top of hills. You'll see forward operating bases and just occupation all over. We have several issues that we deal with. It's not only here in the United States, it is also in Mexico. The established United States-Mexico boundary or border separates my people and our traditional lands in half. And so we still have community members, we still have sacred sites, burial grounds, and ceremonies that take place in what is now Mexico. We have always been pretty peaceful. We like to joke that no one really wanted to come live in the desert where we're at. And so it's up until very recently where we've had to deal with this kind of situation because unlike other Native nations that have been forcibly relocated from their homelands, we're very fortunate to still be where we've always been, according to our stories and our songs, our dances, our culture. And so we see militarization. One of the main concerns that we are looking at is this effect of trauma. We have self-diagnosed ourselves with what we call checkpoint trauma from going through checkpoints every time we have to leave the Thanatim Nation, but also with just what that does to our children and their overall sense of freedom and where we live and how that affects their actions and their mindsets and their health. On the Mexican side, in Mexico, our members there don't have any rights. We don't have established land bases, and what that is causing us is, or what trouble that is causing is that Mexican ranching families, established ejidos, are able to claim our traditional lands through land deeds, which displaces O'odham who still reside in Mexico. The O'odham who reside in Mexico decide to stay there because of our families and our history and the places that are there, our sacred sites. But they don't have access to things such as education and healthcare and the rights that O'odham in the United States have. That is not equal, and that is something that is not right. So they're basically on their own as far as surviving and getting the things that they need. But they do have the freedom to cross into the United States. So that's another thing as well, is the members of the Thanatim Nation are able to cross the border at different, what we call traditional crossing sites. They're not at the established official ports of entry. They're in places that we've always crossed. But what is happening now is just very recently, there are two brothers, the Esteban brothers, and specifically one named Joaquin Esteban. He was deported. And so we were deported on our own lands. We're seeing that we can be deported on our own lands in the United States and Mexico. And this man, his case is becoming known. We are trying to really sit down and look at what that looks like and how this is possible for us to be deported on our own lands. We do have a tribal ID. There is an agreement between the Thanatim Nation and the Department of Homeland Security for us to use that tribal ID as a passport for us to cross the border. But now we're being asked to actually get, official U.S. passports for us to move back and forth. So that's something that is changing. The other thing is intentional violence and abuse to our people by the United States Border Patrol. And so very recently in June, we had a young man who was intentionally hit and run over by a Border Patrol agent in his own yard, in the man's own yard. And he caught the event on film. It did go viral, if anybody has seen it. And that is also going through the court system right now. But it's not the first time that it's happened. In 2002, there was a young man named Bennett Patricio Jr. who was run over and killed by a United States Border Patrol agent, but his death was never brought to justice. And there have been several other cases of abuse and intentional violence, which almost always never come to any sort of justice. And so that is of great concern as well. We are concerned about the future of our children and what that looks like for them. We definitely do want to be able to have our own border policies, as we are a border community, a border tribe who are dealing with the United States government and the different agreements, establishing memorandums of agreement with the United States Border Patrol and what they can and can't do on our lands. But it's a new thing. It's not a new thing, but it's a new thing. And there's very different areas that our community, our tribal governments are working through to make sure that we're able to have the freedoms that we've always had as O'odham, as desert people, as indigenous people, because we believe and we feel that, we have the ultimate truth. We were there historically, we've been there culturally before the United States was the United States, before Mexico was Mexico. We were there. And we've always had the tradition of migrating across our lands with other people, trading seed, trading food, trading songs, trading stories, and having that overall connection on the land. And so that's where I come from, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speakers? No? Yes?
Ann Charles, the Baltic Review. The question is for the chairperson in particular, or anyone else on the panel. Do you know if the indigenous Crimean Tatars of Ukraine who are now living under Russian occupation, according to Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, spoke at this year's event, and whether there was any mention of a new resolution under consideration on the Crimean Tatars during this year's UN General Assembly?
Thank you for the question and for the interest on the people of the Crimean Tatar from Crimea. Unfortunately, I don't have any update on the situation on any declaration that will refer to Crimean Tatar during the next General Assembly. So I'm very sorry about that, and if we can keep in contact, and I have some resource people from the Crimean Tatar, and we can update you on any upcoming resolution or any ongoing discussion on that issue. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, would anybody like to make some closing remarks brief, anything to add?
I would like just to thank my co-panelists who came from around the world. And I'm happy to know that Amy is also a desert person like myself. I'm Tuareg from desert. We are named the people of desert, of one of the biggest deserts in the world, the Sahara Desert. I would like to thank the journalists who came and who showed an interest on the International Day of Indigenous Peoples, and finally to thank again the Department of Public Information within the United Nations, as well as our Secretariat. And I will again recall on all the stakeholders, member states, UN agencies, public sector, to make a particular attention for the fulfillment of indigenous people's rights that are in the situation of displacement, migration, and in general for the right of indigenous peoples. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the speakers. Thanks all for coming.